And that's why I call her AR-15.
Christmas, I give you the very next day, you boom, boom, boom.
Welcome to all of you. And Scotty, let me just start with you as a Trump supporter, springboarding off of, David's point. I mean, listen, Trump, did so extraordinarily well and became the party's nominee because of, phrases like build a wall and deportation force. I don't want you to get ahead of Trump on Thursday, but do you think he will be softening his stance on immigration?
I don't think he'll be softening his stance, Brooke. I think he's just going to once again encourage enforcing the law that we have. We already have a version of a deportation force in our law. It's called ICE. Last year, they deported more than almost 500,000 people from the United States. And all Mr. Trump is doing is saying that he's going to want to continue to strengthen them, support these officials, while at the same time going through our immigration system that I think we all can agree is broken right now, and finding a better, more mainstream way so that we know who's exactly coming into this country.
Do you get a sense, though, because when we hear over the weekend, when he sat on Saturday with a number of Hispanics, one attendee at this roundtable told BuzzFeed they want to put together a task force very much like the Ronald Reagan days with the exception of amnesty. Someone else told Univision their interpretation of Trump's comments. I really liked that Trump acknowledged that there is a big problem with the 11 million undocumented people who are here and that deporting them is neither possible nor humane. Can you understand, Scotty, why people today are confused?
Oh, absolutely. And once again, it's interpretation. Hence why I think Donald Trump's policy speeches these past 3 weeks have been exceptional at trying to explain what he wants to do in these areas, something that we're not seeing from Hillary Clinton. Thursday, I guarantee you will continue to clarify it and lay out that plan. As several other people have pointed out on your show, there's a difference between primary and being in a general election. Now he's getting down to the specifics and a timeline, and most importantly, what he can actually pass and work with Paul Ryan and Congress in making sure happens, and not just these empty campaign promises that continue to pander to the Hispanics and the African American vote. He actually wants to help them and get a solution to a problem that I think everybody agrees we have.
Mary Linda, you've just been listening to Scotty, and she also used the word clarify, which I can already hear some folks on the left saying, well, hello, don't we have 77 or 78 more days to go? We need not be clarifying at this point in the campaign. Mary Linda, what do you think?
I think there's been a lot of clarifications, and it's important that we not jump to conclusions, but hopefully on Thursday this will be somewhat of a rhetoric meets reality moment, in that so much rhetoric for the last now year at least has been quite politically motivated, of course, and we've had a lot of that when it comes to the immigration debate in the last 8 years, what with executive actions and promises coming from the other camp as well, the Clinton campaign. So I'm hoping that the divisive rhetoric will maybe be toned down, and we'll be looking at what we all really want, which is practical, sensible, feasible reforms that can be achieved on a bipartisan basis through Congress. This is what we all want to hear, and this is what's extremely important to the Latino and Hispanic community.
Now, toned down rhetoric may be great if he wants to grab those Hispanic voters in this final stretch, but it may not work for those, more hardliners who have, effusively supported him to get him this nomination, Angela Rye, which I'm wondering, net gain, net loss there for the Trump campaign. You're listening to all this. Thoughts?
So a couple things. I think one is I remember being a kid and my mother needing to put my medicine in something sweeter so that I would digest it, right? So just because Donald Trump is saying today that the policies will be more humane, I can't help but to think about the fact that during the primary season at debates he talked about deporting, literally putting on planes 11 million people. Or he talked about building this big beautiful wall, or he talked about the fact that Mexicans are drug dealers and rapists. When you hear all of those things combined, there's still medicine, and I would argue poison in this instance. Even if he is wrapping something sweet around it, it still is what it is. So unless he's talking about substantially dialing back these policies to now meet the Kellyanne/Pence campaign, if he's not doing that, it's still Breitbart and Trump.
Scotty?
Well, it doesn't matter what the GOP or Donald Trump does to reach out to Hispanic voters or African-American voters. There's always going to be people that are just going to spin it and say that they're going to ignore it and sit there and demonize it.
What do you mean it doesn't matter?
Well, it doesn't matter what he says. There's nothing that sometimes the GOP could say to people like Angela Rye and others that is going to appease them unless it's simply, I give up. And that's not what we're going to do in this country. I think when you talk about the specific policy issues like school choice, Mr. Trump's the only one that is for school choice, school vouchers. The majority of African Americans, 58%, they're for it as well. When we get into the specifics and actually are able to talk about those instead, I think many within both of those minority groups will say, maybe I should be giving the Republican Party a second chance.
Since you invoked my name, Scotty, let me respond to you. So the reason why I can laugh off your candidate and the reason why you're non-responsive to my needs and to needs of people who look like me in my community, even though we're not monolithic, especially when you start talking about black and brown folks, because you just lumped us together, and that's part of the reason why you all had the autopsy report to begin with in 2012. The first thing you should probably do is engage a group of concerned citizens, and you should do it a whole lot sooner than in August, like Mr. Trump did on Saturday with the Latino folks who were just, one, for example, was so excited to be there this morning at this hour that he didn't know what happened meeting. So I think that part of a good start is to understand history and what our policy prescriptions, needs, and priorities are. And then you can start speaking for me. But thanks, Scotty.
Well, it's interesting that you brought that up, because actually Mr. Trump started engaging last August when he first put together his African American coalition. But you choose to ignore those conservative and Republicans who are African Americans that are supporting Mr. Trump. But there's been a large coalition, a long track record of them.
All 5 of them.
No, there's more than 100 pastors that signed a letter a year ago. What has Hillary Clinton done to reach out to these communities?
I'm happy to answer that. That's clearly a talking point that you all got on the call earlier. What I'll tell you is this, plain and simply. If you want to reach out to African American voters, Scotty, the one way to not do that is to go into North Carolina and talk about you wish that the voter suppression measure that the judge threw out was still on the books. If you want to reach out to African American people, one way not to do that is to call Black Lives Matter activists thugs and terrorists. If you want to reach out to black voters, one way to not do that is to talk about paying the legal fees of someone who hit a black protester or a black man in the face. If you want to reach out to black voters, don't throw black people out your rallies. So there are a number of ways to do that, and none of them are what your candidate
I'm listening to both of you, and I appreciate. Just hang on a second, Mary Linda. I know you want to jump in. Go ahead, Mary Linda.
Sure, yeah. I was just going to say, I mean, here's the point. Again, we can talk about what people say and, you know, how it's perceived and received by different communities, but at the end of the day, we actually need policy solutions, because policymakers have to put something in legislation that will accomplish our goals. So instead of talking about, you know, who said it best, who's being divisive, I know that's a problem in this country, unfortunately, very pervasively right now. But at the end of the day, we all need to be talking about solutions. There are a lot of practical reforms that are real out there and that are feasible, and hopefully Trump will roll some forward, and people on the other side will as well, and we can all work together on that. I think that's really what everybody wants.
Okay.
Angela just made my point when I said it doesn't matter what we say. Angela will always do.
No, all of that mattered. Every single bit of those points mattered.
Let's say goodbye for now.
Christmas, I give you scrap, the very next day.